Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 39, and thanks to our patron Brian, has selected we cover the one, the only, the inimitable Sentinel of Liberty himself, Captain America.
Yeah, he's okay.
I cannot begin to describe how excited and scared I am to cover this episode. Scared because Captain America, there's so much of him. He's been around for decades, an extensive period of time.
Very true. Very true.
That he's undergone so much and been part of so many things. I think aside from maybe the Joker, we haven't had a character with this extensive length of backstory.
Yeah, that's fair.
We haven't had a character that's been around this long. And he means so much to so many people, first and foremost, myself included, because, and I've mentioned this once or twice before on the show, I have the Captain America shield tattooed on my shoulder blade. And I got that as a 30th birthday gift from my parents. They said, "What do you want? You're turning 30. What do you want?" And I said, "I want a tattoo." And they said, "Okay, what do you want the tattoo of?" And I made the decision. I said, "I want the Captain America shield on my left shoulder blade." Because I always said for years, if I got a tattoo, I would want it to be something that I would be willing to have on my body for the rest of my life. And also I would want it to be something that meant something to me and in a location that was symbolic. And so the shield is on my back on my left side because I'm always carrying the shield with me. And my left side is where my heart is. And so it protects my heart from the back, but that I always carry Captain America's shield on my back. And when we post the episode, when you're listening to this, I'll make sure that I share a photo of my tattoo so you can see what it looks like, because it's not just the circle. There's some shading in there. There's a little lighting effects. So it looks like Captain America's shield. Cap is a character that means, as I said, a lot to a lot of people. And he means a lot to me personally because he is the ideal, and he always does what's right because it is the right thing to do. And he will always defend people. He will always stand up for the right thing. He will stand up for people who need protection, who need someone to stand up for. He is the ideal American. He is the ideal person, I think. And for a fictional character, I understand that there's a lot of projection to be placed on him, but Cap is what I try and strive to be like in my personal life in many ways. And you may laugh at me for wanting to be like a fictional character instead of wanting to be like a real person. But to me, the two greatest, I guess, idols in my life as far as who I would want to be like are Fred Rogers and Steve Rogers. So one real, one fictitious, but I think both of them very much encapsulate the ideal of what a person should be. So this episode, more than any of the other episodes that we've ever done, dare I say even Moon Knight, carries a very special meaning for me.
It's interesting that you point out the relationship you have with the character, because I think I mentioned in a previous episode, if it weren't for the direct request of a patron, I don't think I could do this kind of episode. There are very few characters where I'll say that. Another one that I'll say right up front, people, is Superman. The reason why I have some difficulty with this from a philosophical standpoint is because of the things that Anthony mentioned. He's an icon, and he is considered the ideal. And to pathologize the ideal, if not done properly, can yield potential negative results, in my opinion. Having said that, I have a lot of trust in Anthony, and I have a lot of trust in myself that we're going to navigate this in a way where we're going to have some fun, we're going to learn some things along the way, and we're going to do this character justice. I really hope that anyone that comes across this doesn't automatically think we're saying that there are so many things wrong with Captain America. That is a fear of mine. I think the character's fantastic. I think what they do with him is fantastic. I don't always agree with the directions some of the stories go. Civil War. But the point still stands. I'm going to give this my best try. And I hope everyone appreciates that, because this is one that when we first started debating whether or not we were going to be doing a podcast or what we were going to do in terms of a medium that people would be able to appreciate, this was one I feared. And the fact that we're trusted to do this is a great sign that the people that listen to us really want to hear what we have to say.
As we record this, I am drinking tea out of a Captain America mug, which I said to Doc when I grabbed it, I said was purely unintentional. I grabbed it because it was literally the closest mug that was available. We have a Captain America mug and we have a Spider-Man mug, among other nondescript, just plain white, flowery coffee mugs. Mm-hmm. But I grabbed the Captain America mug.
Yeah, and so you say that as you removed your what kind of sweatshirt was that? It was a zip. I know it was a zip.
Oh, yeah, it's a zip up Captain America hoodie that our friend Jackie got for me, because she gave it to me at the baby shower, because she said everybody always gives the mother gifts and the baby gets obviously all the gifts. She goes, nobody ever gets anything for the dad.
Yeah.
So she got me a Captain America, the First Avenger hoodie as a wonderful thank you gift. And I love and appreciate Jackie. She's awesome. She kicks all kinds of ass. I have multiple. I'm sorry, that's not a Captain America hoodie. That's a Captain America jacket. I have two Captain America hoodies where the hood comes over with the eyes and the A on the forehead. So it turns sort of into a little Captain America cowl. I have at least two physical Captain America shields in the office with me. I have, dare I say, second to Moon Knight, I probably have more Captain America comics than anyone else. But I know that there is no way, shape, or form that I'm ever going to be able to be a Captain America completionist on the scale that I am a Moon Knight completionist when it comes to comic collections, because I am not rolling in that kind of scuttle. I do not have that kind of, I don't make nearly enough money. That would require several $1 million to be a Captain America completionist. So I'll just be grateful with the runs that I have, the books that I have, and I will bask in the glow of Chris Evans as the MCU Captain America. I know that Hannah and Brittany from Popcorn Psychology have a major thirst for him. They're constantly tweeting at him, which, why wouldn't you? Chris Evans is basically a human golden retriever, but he's also the perfect Captain America in live action. And I think I may have mentioned this earlier in the podcast and in a previous episode. When they first announced they were doing a Captain America movie way back in the day, I didn't think Chris Evans was a good choice. I wanted Paul Walker.
Huh.
And I am so glad to be proven wrong, because when they announced Chris Evans, I said he was Human Torch. He was not that good. And he was a good Human Torch. I thought he was a wonderfully cocky Johnny Storm in what were otherwise horrendous movies.
Amen to that.
But they weren't his fault. I thought he did a great job, but he is Cap. It just, the look, the way he carries himself, you fully believe that is Steve Rogers on the screen. And also, I'm not even going to be ashamed to admit it, the dude is just stunning to look at and has a body that I would kill for.
That's fair.
He's damn, son. Like, I know I went slack-jawed over Chris Hemsworth in a prior episode, but Chris Evans as well. Just now, I know why Hannah and Brittany are so thirsty over him. It's just, he's that awesome.
I have nothing to add, so I won't even try.
I didn't think you would. So before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out, as we always do, to another podcast. This week, it's one of Doc's choices, and we're going with Stacking Benjamins, which is not related to mental health or comics at all. Doc?
No, but the way they approach things is very behavioral, and I have a personal reason why I'm suggesting this podcast. It's by Joe Saul-Sehy and an anonymous professional certified financial planner named OG for other guy. And their whole take is it's two guys that know what they're talking about when it comes to finances, but they riff off of each other as good friends so well and have such great interactions that you forget what it is that they're talking about when it comes to money. And the idea that they were able to put this together with the show in quote unquote mom's basement let me realize that, the idea I could be anonymous but still have a positive impact and have a lot of fun, and people hopefully randomly may be able to explore a topic that is very knowledgeable to me, but not to others. This could work because they are highly rated. They don't really need our plug. They are doing incredibly well. They've won awards for their show. But it was my inspiration to think when we finally found a medium that might work for us that, yes, this can be done. It can be done well, and it can be done without being so heady and overwhelming as such an academic process could. So shout out to them, stackingbenjamins.com. They also do a few other podcasts, but that's the one that gets your interest. And as they say sometimes, if you learn anything, keep it to yourself.
Yeah, and maybe if you listen to the podcast, maybe you'll make enough money that you can afford to be a Captain America completionist with respect to a comic collection. So maybe I'll give them a shot next week. So having said that, and we alluded to in the beginning that Captain America has been around for decades, we are not in any way, shape, or form going to be going into the weeds on a character. I know last week we did Negan, who was in several dozen issues of The Walking Dead, really only just limited to the Walking Dead series. But even then, we didn't get into Negan and every single issue that he was in and all of his interactions with the other characters. For a character like Captain America, who has been around for almost 80 years, it's literally not possible for us to do a podcast and cover his appearances and his storylines in any efficient manner in the time frame that we usually cover episodes. In fact, my fawning over him probably drove this into, one of our longer episodes. But my point is that if you're looking for an in-depth analysis of Captain America storylines, you're not going to find it in this episode. This is going to really, as far as the background is concerned, we're really going to gloss over things because he is such a cultural icon. And that's not just me fawning as a fanboy. That's just me stating a fact that everybody knows Captain America. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know who Captain America is. So we're really just going to hit a couple of the points and then get into the issues that he has. So Captain America, created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby in Captain America Comics #1, March 1941, from Timely Comics, the precursor to Marvel. The famous cover, Captain America punching Hitler on the jaw, knocking him out, which they got in a lot of trouble for because the U.S. had not technically entered the war at that point. And there were a lot of isolationists who really didn't want us to take sides in what was then strictly a European war. And we had done World War I. We didn't really want to get involved with World War II. So a lot of the people said, and we were happy to just send some money and a couple of supplies. And then Pearl Harbor happened, and you all know the rest. Or you should if you paid any modicum of attention in U.S. history class. So Steve Rogers is a sickly kid from New York. He volunteers for a government experiment to create a super soldier. The scientist responsible is killed after Rogers undergoes the procedure, leaving him the only specimen. He's given a bulletproof shield made of vibranium by FDR, which was not his original shield, but I'm not going to get into the gist of that. And he befriends young James Buchanan Barnes, a.k.a. Bucky. He battles the Red Skull, a Nazi super soldier, and other enemies of America and freedom. Cap and Bucky are presumably killed trying to defuse a bomb on a plane flying over the North Atlantic as World War II was coming to a close. Moving forward into the 1950s, others carried the mantle of Captain America. It was later revealed that that was not Steve Rogers and Bucky. It was other people pretending to be Steve Rogers and Bucky because Marvel just wanted to continue printing the comics through the 50s, and Cap was battling communists and so on. It didn't really go as well as the anti-Nazi Captain America did. So they later retconned or retroactively continuity basically said that, oh yeah, that wasn't, that was someone else pretending to be Steve Rogers. In 1963, he joins the Avengers. So Steve Rogers is discovered encased in ice by the Avengers. The super soldier serum kept him alive in suspended animation. He was revived by the team and he joined them in Avengers #4. He befriends the Falcon, Sam Wilson, and he falls in love with Sharon Carter, the niece of his wartime love, Peggy Carter, because at the time they were close enough in age that niece was presumably valid. As things progressed and as the 1940s stayed the 1940s and time moved forward, it became niece and then like grand niece. And I think at one point maybe she was like a sister, like originally.
Yeah, it's just honestly a bit creepy to me. I don't know any other way to put it.
And then during the 1970s, Steve becomes disillusioned with the American government based on a storyline that drew a lot of parallels and inspiration from Watergate. And he gave up the mantle of Captain America and became Nomad, a man without a country. He took up the suit once again when he realized that he could support the ideals without necessarily supporting the government. In the 1980s, he once again leaves Captain America behind when the government forces him to work for them, and he becomes known simply as the Captain. And John Walker becomes the new Captain America. They battle, and Steve resumes his title, and Walker becomes U.S. agent. In the Civil War storyline in the late 90s, early 2000s, Cap leads the anti-registration side against Tony Stark's pro-registration faction, and you can hear us talk a little bit more about Civil War in the Iron Man episode that we did. He orders his team to stand down after realizing the fight is costing too much. He gets shot by an assassin who's later revealed to be a brainwashed Sharon Carter and dies, but his body phases in and out of space-time until he's returned to the present by the Red Skull. Very well done initially, but then it was the whole, well, he didn't really die. He's just not in our continuity, which I just thought was kind of a cop-out. I mean, not for nothing, you knew they weren't going to realistically kill Captain America, even though the storyline was called The Death of Captain America. You knew there's no flipping way they're actually killing off Steve Rogers. Any person reading the comics at that point knew that was not actually going to be the case, but they carried forward with it as though it were, because everything is set in stone until it's undone later. So he hands the Captain America mantle to Bucky once he returns, and he takes over S.H.I.E.L.D. until Bucky dies, at which point he resumes being Captain America. And then the serum in his body gets neutralized during Original Sin, and he rapidly ages to a 90-year-old man. Then Falcon takes over as Captain America, and he's coordinating the Avengers missions because even though he can't physically do anything, he still has all of the mental wherewithal, and his strategic abilities are basically second to none when it comes to the Marvel Universe. The serum in his body gets replaced, and then after the Avengers standoff event, a girl named Kobik uses the cosmic cube to rewrite history, making the public believe that Steve Rogers has been an agent of Hydra since the beginning. And although this was reverted, the public does not trust Steve Rogers anymore because, well, he was agent of Hydra, and we saw all the stuff that he did, and they say it was a fake, but I don't really trust you. And that's basically where we are presently in the comics now. There's an amazing run by Ta-Nehisi Coates and Lineal Yu on artwork. And of course, I get it every week or every month. And I am definitely a fan of what is happening. And that's basically your 5-minute recap of the history of Steve Rogers.
Bravo.
If you want more in-depth history on Steve Rogers, you can go to Marvel Unlimited. You can read literally, thousands of comics that have existed over the last 80 something years or 70 plus years. Or
you could do it in moderation and actually live a productive life.
I think you could live a productive life without necessarily, whatever. You get my point.
I want somebody to add up the amount of time it would take to read every single one. I think it would rank up there where it would be disruptive. Just saying.
Oh, and it would absolutely be disruptive. I'm not arguing that, but I still think you can have a productive lifestyle without sacrificing too much. Anyway, that's the background on Captain America Steve Rogers. So, moving into the issues. Now, again, this is something that we really tried to boil down to the essence of the character. We know that there's been different representations of Cap. He's gone through a lot of stuff over 70 plus years. So we're really just going to try and address some of the major overarching things that have happened repeatedly, and the recurring themes that we see throughout the runs over the last, I would say, when he was found in the ice back in the 60s, these themes that have recurred a lot since then. And the first one primarily has to be that he is a man out of time. We always know that he went into the ice in April of 1945. When he comes out of the ice, as all comic book characters do, comic book time is on a much slowed timeline. And so at this point, it's supposed to be roughly 10 to 12 years ago at this point. Mm-hmm. Even though originally he was resurrected in 1963, we're supposed to believe that he only came out of the ice about 10 to 12 years ago, and that things have just really slowed down since then. But the fact is that he's a man from the 30s and 40s, and he has had to adapt to all of the changes associated with the new period. And I think this was done very well in the MCU, particularly in the Winter Soldier. We see a lot of that, him, because that being the first Captain America solo film after the first Avenger, which was the period piece. And we see him, briefly wake up at the end in the present day. But the Winter Soldier really deals a lot with his struggle to adapt those ideals that he had from the 40s versus modern society. And Doc, if you want to just take a crack at some of those issues that he has dealing with, waking up in a brand new era,
sure,
almost like a Rip Van Winkle.
Right. And first of all, I want to address the idea, because I would have the same question. Why are we dealing with this? Because it's not realistic. You're not going to be asleep for years and wake up to a different world. Two things. First, that's not quite accurate. We have had plenty of examples of people that have been in comas for prolonged periods of time. Even if it's not a matter of years, it's long enough that they recognize that things have changed. Second of all, it's not necessarily just about the time. It can also be about the place. Captain America is a soldier. There are plenty of people that have been deployed to different parts of the world, end up involved in conflicts, wars, whatever you want to call it, even if it's aid missions, and they come back to what they thought was their regular life, and things have changed. It can be the people around them that have changed. It could be the actual physical space. The best example I can think of is soldiers that are newly married, get deployed, and come back with their wife whom they left that was pregnant, and they come back and now they have a child. But they've been deployed for 1 or 2 years, and that child doesn't even know what they look like. They don't know anything about them, and therefore they don't have that connection. That's just an example. So this is not as far-fetched as it seems. What that means is the person is going to have a challenge at every front as to what their priorities are. Because we know over time, we have to look at what the people around us want, and we usually want something similar. If you're in one particular environment, I'll continue with the soldier thing because it's so pertinent to Captain America. You know what your regiment is. You know when you're supposed to wake up. You know when your training is. You know what your mission is. You know what your specific role is. And you have an estimate as to when that's going to end. Then you get brought back to civilian life, and none of those guardrails are in place. You're going to have to start to figure things out on your own. And because there usually is not a guidebook, to go back to Captain America specifically, he had people that were interested in what he could do, but nobody said, oh yeah, just read the person's guide to everything that's happened in the past few years. Before we started recording, you gave an example that someone had written down. The fact that if you took 1 second for every human being to act in sequence, it would take, 244 years?
Yes, basically the notion, another podcast had tweeted the idea that there are 7.7 billion humans on the planet. If every single one of them took 1 second to do one thing, only one thing, and laid them end to end in sequence, that I do something for 1 second, Doc does something, and so on and so on, it would take 244 years to accomplish everything. But that's not how time and space and actions work. Every single one of us is acting from second to second, doing all of our things in parallel together. And therefore, they said every second carries 244 years worth of action. And I think just from a conceptual standpoint, that was absolutely mind blowing to think about that. That's how time and space work.
And now expand that the last experience that you had along with everybody else is now decades apart in total, but in quantum levels and exponential levels, it's immeasurable. That's the type of thing that throws someone off, where they have to reevaluate what their value is, because our society, more so now than ever, is what have you done for me lately? And
dun, 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 dun. Ooh, yeah. What have you done for me lately?
Thank you for getting the reference, but also
Sorry, I'm a huge Janet fan.
I was also going to say, I think it's actually gone farther than that. I think we're anticipatory. What will you do for me next? That's how far we've come in terms of expectations on a day-to-day basis.
Damn.
There is such a pressure compared to previous generations to get things done quickly, to get things done efficiently, to get things done without the interference of others and without the need of others because of how technology works. The things that someone like Steve Rogers used to have to research about his enemy, he would have to go through maps, he would have to go through archives, physically searching for things. We have that in our pocket nowadays. So the amount of effort that you need to exert is no longer necessary. But for a person that's used to exerting that level of energy, that can make them question, well, what was the value of what I was doing in the first place?
I've seen this said very well and much more eloquently than I could ever possibly say elsewhere, that we have not evolved to the point as a society and as a species that our technology has evolved to, because we are still stuck in almost an agrarian mindset with the technology that we have. And I've also seen it said, it's humorous, but the point stands. We have the greatest repository of human knowledge available at our fingertips at any given point, and we use it to post cat memes and argue with people.
That's
if you think, I mean, if you really, and I don't want to derail this entirely, but if you think about the fact that, like, I'm currently in right now, as we sit and record this, I am holding in my hand a miniature computer. My cell phone has more processing power than the computer that I took with me to college, which was not that far long ago, which even then had more processing power than it took to send the astronauts to the moon.
And when you talk about that also in terms of size, the fact that you're holding that in your hand, as opposed to the computer that you take to college that may have had a few parts, as opposed to the entire rooms of
ENIAC.
Right. The idea that things have changed that much. In previous episodes, we've done Vandal Savage. We've done Ra's al Ghul. The examples of people that were conscious for many of these changes that happened over time. And my focus at that point was saying they had some level of nostalgia bias, and that might make it difficult for them to adapt. In this case, I'm actually going to take a different view and point out that holding on to things that are incredibly valuable and skills that are starting to erode in society may be a boon to someone like Captain America, like Steve Rogers, because he has the immediacy of the value that he was able to experience. It's not just something he read about. You don't have to do the back in my day kind of story to someone else.
Back in my day, we learned cursive in school. They don't even teach that nowadays.
I think what I've noticed in the writing, though, is that he takes it as a challenge and he takes it head on. He doesn't just automatically fight it as something that has to be eliminated. He takes it as something that he has to learn how to adapt to, but hopefully along the way, people see his example and are willing to incorporate the things that he knows are still important. And that's what makes him such a good character.
Very, very well stated. And yeah, that's, again, just over the decades that he's been written, that's always one of the themes that they come running back to, regardless of whatever run it is. It's not necessarily this, as you said, this nostalgia for the way things were, but the notion that there was maybe a connection that people had because they had to rely on each other, and holding on to that and maybe feeling that it's been lost as we progress through technology. And that's the idea that Cap is trying to hold on to, and maybe trying to sometimes single-handedly reintroduce to American society and to the world, frankly, because in universe, Cap is not just America. He is obviously, wearing the flag, but he is a leader of the world, and he is respected across the globe and across universes, plural, as a man of upstanding moral integrity and leadership. And that segues perfectly into the next point. Cap is consistently portrayed as the moral center of the country, of the world. And that is not something that he really signed up for. If you really want to nitpick, and if you really want to go back to it, he was a scrawny kid who said the Nazis are killing people unjustly, and I want to serve my country. I want to stand up for what's right for the people, but I want to be part of this organization. I want to be part of the army. I just really want to serve. And what it has evolved into is that Captain America is the bastion, as we said earlier, he's the bastion of all that is good and right and ideal. And that's why he, one of the reasons why his character has stood the test of time as many decades as it has. But he didn't really ask for that. He was a soldier who wanted to help. And, as it was said so eloquently in the film, the first Avenger, he said, I don't want to kill people. I just don't like bullies. So he was supposed to be one of many, but he's the only one. And it has expanded into he is the one. That's a lot to take on for someone who didn't ask for it. He signed up for the powers. He did not sign up to be the moral paragon for the Marvel Universe. And that has had an impact on him over the last decades. And go.
Thanks. I will say once again, because I'm sure there are some people saying, well, how on earth is that going to relate to me or to anyone I know? I've said in the Jessica Jones episode that we did that some people win the lottery, and that can take many different forms. This is somewhat different because Steve Rogers didn't necessarily win the lottery, but he certainly did make sure that he put himself in the best position to get a very positive result. And that's something that I think everyone strives to do, no matter what they are doing in their lives. This is a situation of unexpected and overwhelming success. In other words, I'll take us as an example of that. If at some point, besides us doing this podcast in Anthony's house in the studio, it goes beyond that and we end up, for whatever reason, becoming so successful that we have the means to have our own recording studio. And now we are talking to a live audience on a regular basis on the radio, and we're earning good money doing that. And on top of that, please. On top of that, we end up in situations where we have outside consultants requesting our feedback on situations because people have come to trust us as the voice of positive mental health. That sounds like a fantasy until those types of things happen to people. That's true in many different walks of life. And when it does, some people are looking to embrace it and others are not. I think Captain America is honestly somewhere in between. He certainly wanted to have a positive role and he wanted to have a positive effect on society at large. But as you said, there were parts of this where he thought he would be part of a greater group, and the Avengers can sort of be that for him. But once again, he wasn't just a random member of the Avengers that would pop in and out. When he's there, he's the man. And they respect him as the man. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in society at large, when people end up in positions of intense influence, I'm not talking about true automatic power. In other words, not necessarily a president or king or anything of the sort, but your voice is known to be one that when you talk, people listen and people follow, people act on, even if it's something that you consider to be an offhand comment. That's the type of thing that doesn't, in historical terms, usually last that long. There are plenty of examples of, and given that this is February, Black History Month, all of that, you think of people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, whatever side you stand on their approach or opinions of them, the fact is they're not around anymore. They lived very short lives because they became targets. And the reason they became targets is because they were loudmouths. That's exactly what they were. It wasn't a matter of whether or not they wanted to have people target them, but because certain people thought, my goodness, if we don't stop this, it's going to get way bigger than we thought. And even when they died, it got way bigger than anybody imagined, to the point that laws are changed. That tells me this is the type of thing that people shouldn't have for prolonged periods of time. And to go back to what I said I wasn't going to do, I apologize. That's why certain governments start putting limits and we have elections, because you don't want a single king. You don't want a single president to just be the person for the rest of their lives. We know it is a matter of power corrupting, but it also is the idea that no one person can take that forever. Have you seen what our presidents look like after they've been in office versus before? You can pick any single one. I mean, indiscriminately, you can see the humongous differences. And that's not by accident. So take that and say you're going to live that way for the rest of your life, Steve Rogers. Ouch.
Yeah. And as you said, he didn't ask for that. He just ended up there. And if he didn't lose the super soldier serum in the original sin and age to 90, I think he would have eventually anyway from the stress of dealing with that, because it is a lot. It is a massively heavy burden to carry. And again, I don't want to keep going back to the movies because we do focus on the comics here, but it has to be said that they do such a stellar job with showing the issues that Steve has to cope with in the films, particularly Civil War, the ideological battle that he has with Tony over who the Avengers are and what they represent and so on and so forth. And that segues into the last issue that I want to address for Steve, and that is his struggles with representing America. And what is the America that he represents? Because you have the ideals, you have the people, and you have the government. And these are three very related but separate entities. You have the government, which is supposed to represent the people and the ideals, but I think respective of what your politics are, you can certainly understand that the government does not always fully accurately represent the will of the people. I don't think that's too much of a stretch to say. I don't think that's going to hurt us or give us any detractors on that. I think that's a pretty straightforward statement. Then you have the populists themselves, which are in any number of different self-identified boxes, so to speak, or self-identified or otherwise. The populace is in a great many number of labels. And then the ideals of the country set forth by ostensibly the founding fathers or otherwise. And then who determines what those ideals are and what should they be? And do they represent the biases of the people who put them forward? And so there's a great number of areas in which what Steve should be representing is a struggle for him. And how does he cope with that? And how does he determine which version of America does Captain America actually represent? And once again, Doc, Have at it.
Oh, God bless America. Where to begin?
See, something like that could even be, the mere statement, God bless America. Which God? What about non-believers, et cetera, et cetera? You could take that very statement, which was intended ostensibly to be a unifying phrase, and that itself can be divisive. That's the kind of stuff that Steve deals with on a regular basis. That's why he's walked away from being Captain America and he's come back. And, the one famous statement is, I'm loyal to nothing general except the dream, that American dream of hard work, banding together, that sense of community. But even then, that's been tested.
Excellent points. I think that comes to, as you've eloquently put it, the notion that people have certain unifying goals, and someone in a position of power and the ability to help other people wants to continue to see those goals occur. At the same time, people that are in positions of power want to maintain the positions of power, and it's irrespective of anyone else's goals. I would say that Steve Rogers doesn't fall into the latter camp. I think that's agreed upon. However, we also know that this is a swinging pendulum. There is no such thing as one absolute ideal that everyone has always agreed upon. That's a myth. I'm kind of venturing here a little bit, and I apologize. I'm not saying this in a political way. I'm not saying this for any party. I'm not saying this with any other agenda. What I'm pointing out is that even looking throughout history, the idea of America was something to defend against what they thought was an unjust system being foisted upon them by people that were not in their locale, namely the British Empire. Once that part was done, once you changed the notion that there was that unifying enemy, everyone had the same question of, what do we do now? What does this mean? Where do we go from here?
What comes next?
That took you way too long, man. I was trying.
I was waiting for a break.
Okay. By the way, that's a Hamilton reference, people. That's why he did that. But that show really does a good job of pointing out this was not all song and dance and everything was fantastic and people got along.
It kind of was song and dance. I mean, it's literally the point of a musical.
I hate you so much.
You put the ball on the tee, son. Don't expect me not to swing.
Fair enough. My point being that there has always been this conflict of what America is and what America should be. And the idea that you're going to take multiple possibilities and you're going to take one person, one character, and that's supposed to encapsulate everything, that's going to create a problem in and of itself. Because you're going to get people that, even the people that create the character itself, writing it had a very nice starting point because Nazis are bad. That was a very great way to jump it off because who was going to fight that? And you said even that had some level of controversy to it in terms of whether or not people should get involved, but no one said they were good. So that made it simple.
And yet here we are in 2019, and I'm not going to touch that one, but you get what I'm saying.
Oh, man. Okay, fine. The idea that one person, after everything that we've been through as a country, the country itself had a civil war because it couldn't agree upon what nowadays we consider to be a very fundamental point. Don't hold people in slavery. That was an arguable point for centuries.
And depending on some of the people, still is.
So I could understand the conflict that Steve Rogers would have if these types of things are brought to his attention. But to his credit, the ideal that he looks at, I'm going to be a little blasphemous here. The ideal that he looks to is beyond what America is supposed to stand for. It's what Steve Rogers thinks that society at large should stand for. How he developed that at such a young age after being such a scrawny guy and realizing that no matter what, his life still had value, no matter what anyone else said, and that he should have the opportunity to do with his life what he will, especially if it's to advance the lives of others. That is the ideal that he's always put forth. And I do think that's a strong American sentiment. I'm not saying that other countries don't have that, but the unique individualism of it is something that is strongly American. There are many cultures that don't appreciate that nearly as much as the United States does. That is something that is verifiable. And from that standpoint, I think he's been consistent. The speech that he gave to Spider-Man in Civil War has become amazing. Iconic. Exactly. And why is that? Because it was a person that is also considered a pretty strong bastion of things that are good in the Marvel universe. And he was conflicted and asked, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And Steve, without ever saying, by the way, be on my side, without saying that, gave the type of words that indicated, do what you truly think is right. And when other people are challenging you on it, as long as you hold that same feeling, that same conviction, then you go with that.
Now, here's the thing, because I do want to address that, because as you said, that is a very iconic moment, and we'll post, share the link to it. I believe it was in one of the Spider-Man comics as a tie-in to the Civil War. That kind of mindset that I'm doing this because I know it's right, and therefore no one can judge me, or I shouldn't be taken aside for that. That is a mindset that a lot of very hurtful people have used for decades, if not centuries, but I sincerely know in my heart that what I'm doing is right. I am certain that many Nazis feel or felt at the time that what they were doing was really, truly right, and that they were going to do this, consequences be damned. That's how we ended up in the war in the first place. So I always find it very interesting that speech, which is very well done, J. Michael Straczynski wrote it, it's very well done, but that sentiment can be used for such negative purposes and can be used for a totalitarian government, can be used for a monarchy, an absolutist monarchy. There are so many ways that those words can be twisted and warped for nefarious purposes that I always find it interesting. And it was adapted in Civil War. It was referenced as part of Sharon's eulogy for Peggy, but that those words are always held up as, well, this, you have to do what's right. Yeah, but a lot of really messed up people thought a lot of really messed up things were right, and they did it with conviction.
Very true. Very true. And I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I actually was going to do this next, but since you bring it up that way, it works even better. As long as you are looking to better others and what you're doing, first of all, because of my oath, we know the do no harm part. Sometimes that part gets lost in the idea that also do as much good as you can. And there's another part to this that Steve Rogers does pretty much more than any other character I can think of. Maybe Peter Parker comes close. He will examine what he's doing, and based on the results of his actions, will determine if he's still on the right path. He'll course correct. He'll actually take the time to consider, just because he has the conviction of an action, is the action itself still the right thing? If he's noticing that what he's doing is hurting those around him, he will take a different stance.
He did that at the end of Civil War. He said, right, stand down, because it's not, too many people are getting hurt. We've lost the meaning behind the cause.
And I think it was ham-fisted the way they did it, but I think that was an okay conclusion. What I would like to see in terms of a person making those course adjustments and responses, I'll admit it's beyond what Steve Rogers can do, and it's beyond what any one individual can do, is not have the people around them start calling them a flip-flopper or saying that they're too wishy-washy or being a traitor, because that's what ends up happening. Nationalism is something that can be an incredible unifying force for that particular nation. The interactions that they have with other nations can also be a very positive force, as long as there's still this underlying notion that we're coming to an equilibrium for a common good, as opposed to the idea of F you, get mine. What I happen to notice is that a character like Steve Rogers, because the name alone is Captain America, the character doesn't even get much play in other areas because you can't say America. And I think that's a disservice. So when he had a run of Captain Steve Rogers, I was hopeful that that could perhaps play out a little bit longer, because I think Steve Rogers, the person, is a great example for the world, regardless of if you put America in the name or not. And I think that would have been an opportunity for potential fans that never give it the time of day from the name alone. And I'm sorry that they've lost out on that. So if Steve Rogers is struggling with representing America, I think there are plenty of Americans that struggle with representing America. So he's not alone in that sense.
Excellent point. Absolutely excellent point. And I know that there is a Captain Britain, and there's a Captain Canada.
Right.
And there's a Captain Canuck as well.
Right. The Captain Britain one is really interesting because he's viewed as representing the upper class, while Union Jack, who's also a character, is more representing the dregs. And that wasn't the initial intent, but reading through it, they embrace that. And the idea that you have the haves and the have-nots, and even if you have representation of the same country or the same organization that you even recognize within there, you're not always going to be shown in the best light amongst one another. That is done pretty well in the Marvel Universe, I think. It doesn't get much play over here for pretty much the exact same reasons I mentioned. Captain America doesn't get much play depending on certain cultures or nations across the world. That's not anybody's particular fault. That's just the way society works. But I think if people are willing to open themselves up, that they might notice people outside of a certain culture could still have a lot of value in how they approach their lives. That's the whole point of any medium that's fiction.
Well, as you said, it's if they're willing to open themselves up. That is the singular caveat. And to your point about Steve Rogers, he is constantly willing to do that self-examination because he is aware that he is a flawed individual and that he does not have all the answers. And he's striving to find those answers, and he wants to do the right thing, but he knows that he may veer off course. And if he does, then I have to do what's right in order to earn the public's trust back. And that's one of the things that's currently going on in the Ta-Nehisi Coates run is, what do I do to earn the public's trust? And how do I grapple with the fact that I'm saving people that don't trust me and that don't want me to save them? How can I be a symbol for those who don't want me to be a symbol because they don't trust me? I think it's done very, very well because Coates is amazing. His Black Panther run was fantastic. And I'm very much enjoying where he's going now with Cap, especially post Secret Empire, Hydra. Cap still being fresh in the public's mind, both in universe and even out of universe. So I think it's being done very, very well. So moving into the treatment, and this is something that I know just from in universe and as well as out of universe, you alluded to in the beginning of the show when we were even just setting up this podcast. How do you deal with the paragons of virtue and tell them, hey, these one or two things aren't right, but you're still amazing in spite of these flaws, these character defects, whatever term you want to use it. Again, to nitpick, how would you treat Captain America Steve Rogers?
I have a different problem than I did with so many other characters like Booster Gold or even Tony Stark, other people Wolverine, people that are definite heroes, but you can see their flaws. With someone like Captain America, it's more along the lines of how do I acknowledge that I'm willing to recognize this person's flaws? I have to make sure I don't fall into a situation where I try and cover up those flaws. I want them to still be a hero to me, let alone to themselves. And that is a difficult balancing act, to the point that I would have to make sure I have someone that I would consider to be almost a supervisor for me, or a trusted colleague that I could bounce some ideas off of simultaneously, because there is a big chance that I fall into this area where, let's just give an example. Let's say he is having a rough week or something. He feels off his game. He doesn't have confidence in his decisions, and it may be developing into a minor depression. I ask him how he's doing about it. He says, "Oh, well, I'm managing." I have to avoid saying, "Oh, well, you're Captain America. You're managing. Good. Okay, we'll keep this short today." No. How would I treat this as if this were any other patient? I have to make sure I keep this as basic as possible. Go back to the simple things I learned in my residency in medical school and just keep it at that level. For once, instead of seeing the forest for the trees, stick to the tree, because otherwise it'll all just get very murky. And I'll be the person that's trying to do a nice thing for Captain America as opposed to being his true therapist. There is supposed to be a certain power imbalance there. And it's understandable, and most therapists are used to the idea of struggling with another patient that's trying to shift the balance in their favor. This is one of the rare circumstances where the person is so overwhelmingly good that the power balance is the other way, and I have to fight to continue to keep my power. You
have to avoid hero worship.
Yeah, basically, that's it. And everyone has to know what their limits are with that. It would be difficult for me because I'm a comics fan. It would be much different if you told me that this was a great opera singer. I don't follow opera, so I don't know much about it. So I wouldn't think to myself, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I have this famous opera star." So I have to keep reminding myself of that. And I would have to have safeguards. These are sessions, for example, I don't usually do this, but these are sessions where I would actually ask permission if they could be recorded, because I would want to review them myself and review them with a trusted supervisor to find out, what am I doing wrong here? Where am I going back into fanboy mode? When am I off base? And heaven forbid there's something that happens where I have an off day. I should not go into a situation like that where I don't think I'm 100%. If I think I'm not going to be able to put that level of effort and energy into it, then I definitely have to defer to someone else. I'm saying I have to handle this with kid gloves, because this is a person that, in theory, people think are absolutely perfect. I have to make this it's always confidential, but I have to triple my efforts to make sure that something like this remains confidential. Because I'll give an example. In a Medscape article, it pointed out someone's doing an expose on, I gave his name before, Martin Luther King, and it was a discussion of the emotional experiences that Dr. King had. The idea that Dr. King may have had some issues with mood disorder, depression, whatever the case may be, based on some historical evidence. But I don't want to speculate on that. My only point in bringing that up is anyone at any time can have things that they want to work on. And it's not your job to judge whether or not they should work on it. Your job is to help them through it. And there is a huge risk with someone like Steve Rogers where the therapist can get judgmental. As in, wow, you're that good. Why do you need me? And that's not beneficial at all. So that's the number one thing. It's honestly very basic in terms of how to deal with cases like this, as long as you stick to it. That's the one problem I see being a barrier to Steve getting help. It's us, not him. And we have to remember that it's him, not us.
Interesting. Yeah, I could definitely see how that would play out. Now, moving to out of universe. I know we talk a lot about how difficult it is with certain characters to find a corollary. I don't know if there's a real life example that you could draw upon for someone who is so considered to be, it's funny that the name just occurred to me and you're going to laugh. Oprah.
I'm not going to laugh.
In the sense that, and I'm certainly not indicating that Oprah is necessarily this paragon of virtue and goodness, but I think we can also agree that she's a pretty solid stand-up human being. She's incredibly well respected across all countries and value systems, and she is constantly expected to be on. Now, the difference being, of course, that she's very open and forthright about a lot of her issues. So I don't necessarily know that there's a lot that she has kept hidden. But to the extent that she does, what would you say? Because, again, there's that notion that, well, you're Oprah. How could you be, sad about something or whatever? You're worth billions of dollars. Like, you're Oprah. Can't you just can't you just fix the problem? So, and it literally just popped into my head, but I think the example would be
I have a slightly different example. Similarly, I hesitate to just automatically say this, but there are more parallels than you think. A person that was taken out of society for a relatively long period of time, in this case, in part because of their ideals, that ends up beyond their expectations in a position of power that
Mandela.
Impressive. I didn't even go nearly as far as I thought I had to get to that point. But yes, that is exactly who I was thinking of. Either way, the point still stands.
And I really think that the parallels are amazing because, like you said, he was taken out. He was doing what was right, and then he gets elevated to the level that he's Nelson Mandela.
He would say to certain international reporters, "Hi, I'm Nelson Mandela. Do you remember me?" And they would just burst out into laughter because they're like, are you kidding me? How do you think I have trouble remembering you? The fact that you remember me, like that type of back and forth, even though these were supposed to be very serious interviews and whatnot. And that's not even treatment. So I think that's a great example. In situations like that, once again, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I have anything different to say because the point still stands. I need to know from them, what is trying to really compact this, what is the one thing maybe that you think is the most frustrating thing you're dealing with right now? Something that you're struggling with, and let's get out the workbook. Like, I usually have enough of my own mental framework that I don't need a workbook in front of me. But just to keep me grounded enough that the person's going to get that result, I probably would use a cognitive behavioral therapy workbook. They do exist. You can get them on Amazon. I'm not advocating one over another. And we'd fill it out together about what their thought process was of the different situations and what the emotional responses are, and see what we could change in terms of that gap between the initial thought and the action or the emotional result. And I would just go back to basics like that, because the more I do that, the more I focus on the work itself as opposed to getting overwhelmed by the person. So that's the one thing I would say. And honestly, that isn't different. I would do the same thing with Steve Rogers, because anything else, it gets overwhelming. Not to mention some other basic things that I didn't think about until just now. Can you imagine who's coming in and out if someone like that is coming to your office? Where are you located? Because you don't want paparazzi there. You may have to deal with bodyguards for someone like that, and then they may get defensive about some of the things that the person may say and say you shouldn't tell them that, because they want to protect that person as well from private information getting leaked, because they have no reason to trust me any more than they would trust any other person in society. So then it becomes that struggle too. And heaven forbid they're involved in other family members that may want to know what's going on because they care about them. And they say, well, if you're going to someone, clearly something's wrong. What's wrong? And my job is to, once again, maintain that certain level of confidentiality unless that patient wants me to talk to certain people, in which case I am ceding some level of power because I wouldn't be able to access those other people unless they let me. So, boy, oh boy, you want to talk about walking on eggshells, I would equate this more like walking on eggshells that are in a vat of pudding and rusty nails. In other words, I'm not walking. I'm just trying to survive.
Interesting. I like a lot of what you said there. I think it's a lot of things that we don't consider, especially the later stuff that you were talking about, all the additional issues that would have to be addressed.
This is something that's actually more applicable because I just realized talking about this, most of the people listening to this probably aren't that level of celebrity or whatever. So how does this apply to you? Well, in a way it does apply because when I'm in an emergency room, I work for a hospital system. There once in a while will come a situation where they'll say, so-and-so is a VIP. And I don't know always what that means. That could mean they know someone in the administration in the hospital. That could mean that that's so-and-so's family member that I work directly with. Whatever it is, whenever I hear that, my goosebumps just come out all over because that tells me you expect me to change the level of care. And that's not fair to the person. I want to treat the person as well as I can anyway. You saying that adds a layer of complexity that's not going to benefit anyone, which is also why, and I don't think this is something that is universal. So fait accompli, like this is up to how anyone wants to handle it themselves. I usually recommend if you have a family member that needs medical attention and you know someone in the local hospital, go to a different hospital. Do not go to the same one, because when you do that, there is a risk that they are going to get different treatment, not necessarily better treatment. That is just a risk.
Truth.
I'm not saying that you have to do that. If you have the trust and the person is going to be treated the same way, fantastic. That's great. I'm glad you have that built-in support. I'm just saying I've seen it happen the other way, and I do want to give that as a risk factor.
Very, very important, very key statement that just because it's different treatment doesn't necessarily make it better. I think that's a very valid point to make. Well, I think that there's a lot here. And there's a lot to address. So let's see what happens when we get Steve Rogers on Dr. Issues' couch. Hi, I'm Steve Rogers.
Right. Sorry, I'm Dr. Issues. I'm so sorry. I usually introduce myself to my patients, but this is the first time I've been nervous, and this is the first time in a very long time.
No need to be nervous, doctor.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for everything that you've done through the years for everyone. So it's my privilege to serve you.
Oh, please, doctor. Thank you. Your words are appreciated. So how does this work?
Well, before we get started, can I just ask you something?
Of course.
Do you have the shield with you?
It's in the hall. I didn't think I'd need it here.
Oh, of course. Can I hold it?
When we're finished, I'll take a picture of you holding it.
Whoa, I wasn't going to go that far, but since you offered, that is so cool.
I get it all the time. It's okay.
You're amazing. I know I'm supposed to be neutral and professional, but it's hard. I mean, you're Captain America.
Yes. Now, can we get started?
Yes, sir.
There's no need to salute, son.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, Captain.
It's all right. Just breathe.
So, Mr. America, Mr. Captain.
Just Steve is fine.
Okay, Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, this isn't easy, although based on this initial interaction, I don't think I can count you among my detractors.
That's an understatement.
I've just been having a hard time lately with everything that's happened over the last few years.
Oh, you mean the Hydra stuff? Don't worry, I didn't believe that for a second. I knew Captain America would never betray us like that.
Yes, that's exactly it. See, you believe me and support me, but there are millions, if not billions, of people who don't. And I've been struggling with how to carry on helping people when the people I want to help don't believe in Steve Rogers anymore.
Oh, it can't be that bad.
I'm afraid it is. I've had people running away from me as I'm trying to rescue them. They're calling me a Nazi, as though I didn't literally begin my career beating them up.
They Godwined you? You?
I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Oh, don't worry. I got this.
What are you doing?
Oh, I'm just going on my Twitter account and making sure I defend you. Hashtag Cap is for us. Hashtag not a Nazi.
Are you supposed to be doing this in a confidential session?
I didn't hit send. Delete. Oh, God. Okay, so anyhow,
I'm wondering if I should find a different professional.
no. I assure you, I'm acting in your best interest at all times, and I won't sell the photo on eBay with your autograph.
That's a suspiciously specific denial.
Okay, so oh my god. Okay, so now I'm done being overwhelmed. Let me ask you: do you have any personal supports during this difficult time?
Well, there's Sharon. She still believes in me, I think.
Excellent. And how often do you talk with her?
Every day when I can.
Wonderful. Do you think maybe this could be a group session with her? I mean, she may actually be a stabilizing force here, since I'll admit I'm kind of going overboard in my approach right now.
I think I can talk to her about that.
I'd also recommend keeping in excellent physical shape, but I'm sure you do that anyway. I mean, how much do you bench, man?
I don't see how that's relevant right now.
Right. Okay. Okay. Seriously, what about your sleep patterns, your appetite? You know, sometimes when people are stressed, those things go by the wayside.
I sleep enough. I eat enough. Those things haven't really changed.
Is there anything that you use as a specific coping mechanism?
Well, usually I'm too busy focused on trying to save people or prevent some major catastrophe from happening to get too bogged down in my own thoughts. But when it's the saving people that's causing problems, you can understand my dilemma.
You mean you don't get any downtime?
I get a little here and there, but unfortunately it seems that there's always some grand event happening that requires my help or the Avengers' help. They seem to happen every few months, really.
But you can't be at your humanity-saving best if you don't get an opportunity to recharge. That's just so sad.
Doctor, are you about to cry?
No.
If I didn't know better, I'd say I take these situations in stride better than you do.
Well, usually I do a good job, but I'm not sure what's happening here.
I don't know either. I feel like part of this is me helping you as much as you helping me.
That sounds accurate. Usually if I have something I need to emotionally or intellectually process, I have other professionals I can turn to. But I have the bastion of all that's supposed to be good in the world here with me, and I find out that they have their own problems.
See? That's just it. You call me the bastion of all that's supposed to be good in the world. Well, I didn't ask for that position. I didn't ask for that kind of pressure. I know I volunteered for the experiment, but I wasn't supposed to be the only one. And I wasn't anticipating that I'd be placed on a pedestal by the whole world. I just wanted to do what was right and help defend the little guy. I know the world needs help and saving, and I know I'm not alone in that. I just wish sometimes I didn't feel like so much rested on my shoulders. I'm a super soldier, I'm not a superman.
Then I can help. I just need to do it slowly. I need to do it in very small portions. Otherwise, all of my initial reactions will just repeat themselves. That's not beneficial to me or to you. I don't think it would be isolated to just me. So while this may not sound helpful at the moment, I think it's necessary. Just bear with me here. Hello, Steve Rogers. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doctor.
So I understand you have a heavy weight on your shoulders.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Well, I may not be able to remove the tons, but I think I can start with 1 ounce. No words, no questions, no requests, just silence for as long as you'd like.
That sounds nice.
What's that?
It's an Avengers alert. Priority 1. Sorry, Doc. Looks like I'll have to take a rain check on that silence.
Well, what about the photo? Can I hold the shield real quick?
Sorry, she's coming with me. Next time, I promise.
You know what? That's really good. You just set boundaries with me. That's great. And I don't get to put anything on eBay.
Oh my God, you got to meet Captain America. Tell me what it's like. Did you smell him? What cologne does he wear? How big are his muscles? How much does he bench? What is he like? What shampoo does he use? What's his workout regimen? What does he eat? How does he sleep? What can I do? I need to be him. Please help me be him.
That is all confidential information. I can't tell you how many buses he can bench press at once. I can't tell you that he's just a regular Head and Shoulders guy. I can't tell you that his favorite dinner is steak. I can't tell you that he doesn't like A1 except unless it's on the side with a little bit of mixed with ketchup. I can't tell you that he...
Okay, I'm sorry. You lost me right there with the A1 and the ketchup because, frankly, that just, to me, sounds sacrilegious.
So you don't think he's as good as you first thought, huh?
Not if he puts ketchup and A1 together. First off, who the hell puts ketchup on steak? Secondly, if the steak is, a little bit of A1 is okay on the side. But the steak should be seasoned well enough on its own that you don't need the A1. If you're using A1, it means the steak itself is flavorless or has a bad flavor and isn't seasoned properly. Because I used to swear by A1, and you know this.
Right.
You remember, I used to swear by A1.
Correct.
Literally the point that I would wait to eat the meal until the A1 was brought to me.
Yep.
I don't do that anymore because my wife seasons the steak so beautifully, so amazingly, that it melts in your mouth. Just a little bit of butter. That's all you need.
Well, I am so grateful that we have made this the gastronomic podcast.
Yeah. And now I'm really flipping hungry.
Well, you should be. We've been at this too long.
Fair point. So let's wrap this up then. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you, Brian, for suggesting Captain America. I wondered if at any point we were going to get to Cap and how we would handle it. Yeah. And I think as long as this episode has been, I think we've done a pretty solid job.
I hope so.
Of covering him. And I'm sure that there may come a point in which we revisit Cap, maybe in a more limited scope, maybe as part of just a given arc or a particular storyline. But for right now, I think that's we've done a pretty good job, and we didn't delve into the hero worship too much.
Until the skit.
Until the skit, yeah. But, that's for humor purposes. Next week, our other patron, Matt, our other president level patron, Matt, has suggested Frank Castle, the Punisher.
Oh, well, at least I could say that we were going to get to that anyway. Holy cow. He's got a lot to deal with.
But there's another character that's been not nearly in as many comics as Steve Rogers, but Frank Castle certainly has been in his fair share of comic events and moments. And he's got a lot to work on. And before they officially announced that the Punisher Netflix series has been canceled, we can talk about it. Although, like I said, maybe by the time this episode rolls around, it will be officially canceled. And then after the Punisher, we're going to do back-to-back Captain Marvels, Carol Danvers, and Monica Rambeau to tie in with the release of the Captain Marvel film. You can find all of our shows on our website, capesonthecouch.live. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. You can check out our Patreon page. You can find our show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Please like, subscribe, leave a positive rating, and we will read one on the show for our listeners because we appreciate our fans and everything that they do for us. Doc, before we head out, anything you want to add?
Greatness only happens when the people around the great ones support them for it. I really hope that people like Captain America do exist because it would make the world a better place.
Amen. Speak truth to that. I certainly do my best to live a little bit like Steve Rogers and Fred Rogers every day because God knows the world could use a lot more of them than we already have. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.